I will include 15 tips inside the Blender UI that you can follow to achieve fast rendering, plus 3 additional tips outside of Blender that will speed up the rendering process as well. So with that being said, I would like to welcome you to Graphinity, and let's dive into the video. Number 1. Noise Threshold. The noise threshold in Blender is a quality control setting that lets you define an acceptable level of noise in your render, like 0.01, which is the default value. When a pixel's noise falls below this threshold, rendering for that pixel stops. This dramatically speeds up the rendering without sacrificing much quality. Use it effectively, set a reasonable noise threshold, and lower your sample count. With the noise threshold, you can achieve faster renders with decent image quality, a valuable balance for time-critical projects like animation, which I don't do that often, but when I do, this really comes handy. Number 2. Sample count and denoising. Combining a reduced sample count with denoising is a potent strategy in Blender to speed up rendering while maintaining the respectable quality. By lowering the sample count, the number of samples per pixel is reduced, resulting in a faster render times. To compensate for potential noise in the final image, use denoising, a post-processing feature that smooths out the imperfections. You need to go to render layers and check denoising data. Then, in Composing tab, add a denoise node. And for the best quality possible, you will connect the nodes in this order. This synergy between fewer samples and denoising enables significant time savings in rendering, which is also beneficial for animations. Number 3. Rendering device. Selecting the right render device in Blender significantly impacts the render speed. Optics, which is essentially compatible with NVIDIA GPUs, tends to be faster than CUDA. To harness this speed boost, ensure that you have compatible GPU and select Optics or CUDA in Blender settings. When rendering, the GPU-focused optimization speeds up the process, especially for the complex scenes. By choosing the optimal render device, you can tap into the power of your graphics card, significantly accelerating your rendering tasks without sacrificing the quality. Number 4. The fast GI approximation. Fast global illumination, or GI approximation in Blender, cuts down the rendering time by providing a quicker, slightly less accurate solution for global illumination calculations. Global illumination plays a crucial role in scene lighting and realism. To use the fast GI approximation, go to Render Properties panel, find the Light Path section and adjust the settings. While fast GI approximation can cut rendering times, it's essential to find the right balance between speed and quality, as overly aggressive settings may compromise realism. It's ideal for previews render and projects with tight deadlines, allowing you to save time while still achieving acceptable visual fidelity. Number 5. Light paths. Light path settings in Blender control how many times light rays bounce within the scene. For fast renders, reducing the values for bounces, transparency and transmission can be effective. Lowering these settings limits the complexity of light interaction, which accelerates rendering. However, a striking balance is crucial. Overly aggressive settings may result in unrealistic scenes, so this basically means that you need to adjust the values based on your scene and the materials that you are using. So for example, if you are using glossy materials, you need to increase the light bounces for glass. But if you are not using any of that, you can set the light bounces to 0. Number 6. Caustics. These settings are also related to glass. Disabling caustics in Blender accelerates rendering by skipping the computation for intricate light patterns. Caustics are visually appealing, but they often require extensive calculations, causing longer render times. This is advantageous for the scene where caustics aren't a central element, or when you prioritize faster results. So basically, by turning off caustics, you will save substantial rendering time without impacting the image quality too much, making it an effective approach for achieving quicker, caustics-free renders. Number 7. Simplify. The Simplify feature in Blender streamlines rendering by reducing scene complexity. It can be found in the Render Properties panel, lowering values for subdivision, view and render levels and other options that are simplifying geometry and materials. This accelerates rendering for previews or scenes where the fine detail isn't crucial. However, be aware of the fact that you should not oversimplify, as it may compromise the quality. Number 8. Tile size. A specific tile size is a crucial factor in rendering efficiency in Blender. It involves dividing the image into smaller rendering tiles distributed across CPU and GPU cores. There are a lot of factors that are influencing the speed, but generally speaking, if you are rendering with your GPU, bigger tiles are a better option, but on the other hand, CPU rendering performs better with smaller tiles. Number 9. Camera culling. If you enable this feature, it will exclude all objects that are not visible in the camera's view from rendering calculations. By doing so, it saves the computational resources, especially in extensive scenes. Blender automatically avoids rendering objects outside of the camera frame. To harness camera culling, ensure proper scene organization and object placement within the camera's view. This effortless technique optimizes rendering for faster results. It efficiently enhances rendering speed without compromising image quality, so this is a very valuable tool for more efficient workflow in Blender. Number 10. Persistent data. Persistent data in Blender can significantly accelerate rendering by storing certain scene information between render sessions. It conserves data like bounding volume hierarchy, acceleration structures and other pre-computed information, reducing the need to calculate them each time you render. To utilize persistent data, go to Performance section in Render Properties and enable it. However, be careful when making changes to your scene, as they may not be reflected until persistent data is cleared. Number 11. Adaptive Subdivision. If you are a 3D artist who is oriented in organic 3D modeling, or environmental artist, this is for you. Adaptive Subdivision optimizes rendering by dynamically adjusting the level of detail or the subdivision in your scene. It focuses computational resources on areas that need more detail, reducing processing time. So, for example, if you have a plane with subdivision surface modifier, the subdivision will be higher in areas where the mesh is closer to the camera or the view. On the other side, the second part of the plane that is far from the camera does not require the amount of detail, so the subdivision in that area will be smaller. Number 12. Using GPU. This is mostly an obvious fact, but for those who don't know, there's a 99% chance that your GPU is way better than your CPU. A good GPU can dramatically reduce rendering times compared to CPU rendering. However, the effectiveness depends on your GPU's power, to ensure your hardware meets Blender requirements for optimal results and faster rendering. But generally speaking, using GPU is more efficient, faster and less buggy. The only advantage of using CPU for rendering is that CPU will not crash. Number 13. Use instances. Instances are basically duplicates of an object or a collection, sharing the same data, which reduces the computational load. To use instances, select an object or collection, right-click and choose Instance to Scene or Instance to Object. This creates instances that renders faster, especially in scenes with many repetitive objects like forests or crowds. They are also helping to reduce the use of memory and speeding up the render while maintaining the visual interest. Number 14. Use experimental features. I actually don't know why, but from my own experience, when I just switch from supported to experimental features, the rendering is just faster. But I would say if you enable experimental settings in Blender, you can unlock new features and optimizations that are potentially speeding up your rendering. But I personally wouldn't rely on this feature because sometimes it works and sometimes it just simply doesn't. Now we have covered all the tips from the Blender user interface. But there are ways how you can improve and speed up your rendering outside of Blender, and I will give you 3 of these tips. Closing other apps. Closing other programs while rendering in Blender is a practical way to boost rendering speed. To maximize your computer's resources for rendering, it's advisable to close unnecessary applications, particularly those who use CPU or GPU extensively, such as web browsers or graphic-intensive software. Ensure your system is dedicated to rendering during the process to make the most of your hardware and also the most of your render. Render farms. If you don't have powerful GPU, Render Farm is a perfect solution for you. They are using multiple networked computers that are dividing the render task, drastically reducing render times for complex projects. You can just upload their file sync to their service, specify the settings and submit the job. The render farm's distributed processing power, often with advanced hardware, this parallel approach can complete tasks in fraction of the time, ideal for big or time-sensitive projects. The rendered frames are then downloaded from the service, so you can have them quickly in your device. Multiple devices. This can only help with rendering your animations, but if you have multiple devices like a laptop, if you go to output properties, there is a frame range option where you can increase the step. So you will basically render every second image, and if you do that for the same project on another computer, you can end up with a half of a time if you have the similar hardware specs. Now you can re-render the scene and see the difference by yourself. This will allow you to save a lot of time because now you can render X times faster than before. But keep in mind that the speed will depend on your scene. Sometimes you will be able to cut down the render only to half of the regular time, but sometimes you can render 10 times faster or even more. That's it for now. I hope this was helpful for you. If yes, like, subscribe and share. And if you haven't yet, go check out other videos about 3D that I recently uploaded. That's all for now, see you next time.